The cowboy was riding through town when he noticed an Apache woman quietly begging for food near the market. While everyone else walked past her, he stopped and offered her something to eat. But when she looked into his eyes and revealed who she really was, the cowboy realized this was no ordinary stranger. Her identity was connected to a secret that could change everything he thought he knew. Red Creek was already awake when Clark Mercer rode into town. The morning sun had barely climbed above the hills, yet the dusty street was filled with activity. Farmers unloaded crates of vegetables, merchants opened their wooden stalls, and horses moved slowly through the crowded road. Clark had come to buy flour, coffee, and a few supplies for his ranch. He tied his horse outside the general store and was about to walk inside when he noticed a small crowd near the market. At first, he thought someone was selling something unusual. Then he saw her. An Apache woman stood near the edge of the street. She was quietly asking people for food. She did not shout. She did not demand anything. She simply stood there with tired eyes, asking if anyone could spare something to eat. Most people walked past without stopping. Clark watched for a moment. The woman looked exhausted. Her clothes were dusty from a long journey, and she kept glancing toward the road as if she were searching for someone. Clark slowly walked toward her. "You hungry?" The woman looked up. For a second, she seemed surprised that someone had actually spoken to her. She nodded. Clark turned toward a nearby bakery. He bought a loaf of bread, some fruit, and a bottle of water. When he returned, he handed the food to her. She stared at him before accepting it. "Why?" Clark shrugged. "Because you need it." She lowered her eyes and quietly thanked him. Clark was about to leave when he noticed something hanging around her neck. An old silver pendant. He stopped. The symbol carved into the metal looked strangely familiar. Clark had seen it years ago. It belonged to a man he had once called a close friend. Thomas Reed. Clark looked at the woman. "Where did you get that?" Her expression changed immediately. She held the pendant tightly. "My father." Clark felt a sudden chill. "Who was your father?" The woman hesitated. Then she quietly answered, "Thomas Reed." Clark stared at her. Thomas had disappeared years earlier. No one in Red Creek knew what had happened to him. Clark had spent a long time believing he would never hear that name again. But now Thomas's daughter was standing in front of him. She looked directly into Clark's eyes. "My name is Elena Reed." Clark could barely find the words. Then Elena said something that made him forget everything around them. "My father told me to find you." Clark looked toward the busy street. Suddenly, the hungry stranger he had noticed moments earlier was no longer a stranger. She had arrived carrying a message from his past. And Clark knew he had to hear the rest of her story. Clark led Elena away from the busy market and toward a quiet bench behind the general store. He wanted to understand why Thomas Reed's daughter had come looking for him after all these years. Elena held the silver pendant tightly. "My father spoke about you often," she said. Clark looked surprised. "What did he say?" "He said you were a man who kept your word." Those words brought back memories Clark had buried long ago. He remembered long rides beside Thomas, quiet conversations around campfires, and promises they had made to each other. "What happened to him?" Clark asked. Elena lowered her eyes. "I was told he disappeared while searching for something." She reached into her small travel bag and pulled out an old folded letter. "My father left this behind." Clark carefully opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Thomas had written about an old agreement concerning the valley near the river. He believed important records had been hidden, and those records could settle a dispute between several families. But Thomas had never returned. Clark looked at Elena. "Do you know where the records are?" She shook her head. "Not exactly." Then she remembered something her father had told her when she was younger. He said the answer was connected to an old bell near the river. Clark immediately knew what she meant. There was an abandoned trading post several miles outside town. An old bell still stood beside it. "Your father wanted you to find me because he knew I would understand." Elena nodded. Before Clark could say anything else, he noticed a stranger standing across the street. The man was watching them. When Clark looked again, the stranger turned and disappeared into the crowd. Clark's expression became serious. "We should leave town before sunset." Elena looked worried. "Why?" Clark folded Thomas's letter. "Because I think someone else knows about your father's secret." Clark and Elena left Red Creek before sunset, following the narrow trail that ran beside the river. For most of the journey, neither said much. Elena kept the old letter close to her, while Clark watched the trail behind them. The stranger from town remained on his mind. After nearly 2 hours, they reached the abandoned trading post. The building stood beside the river, surrounded by tall grass and old cottonwood trees. Its wooden walls had faded with time, but the old bell still hung beneath the small roof near the entrance. Elena climbed down from the horse. "My father brought me here once," she said. Clark looked at the bell. "Do you remember anything?" She walked around the wooden frame. Then she stopped. There. A small symbol had been carved beneath one of the support beams. It matched the symbol on her pendant. Clark moved closer. He ran his fingers across the old wood and noticed that one section was loose. Together, they moved the board aside. Behind it was a narrow compartment. Inside sat a small leather packet. Elena carefully opened it. Several old papers were folded inside. One carried Thomas Reed's signature. Her eyes filled with emotion. "My father." Clark examined the documents. One was a rough map of the valley. Another showed a trail leading deeper into the hills. Then they heard a horse outside. Clark immediately turned toward the doorway. Someone was approaching. A man stepped into the trading post. Elena recognized him. "Daniel." The man looked at her with relief. "Elena, I have been searching for you." Clark remained cautious. "Who are you?" The stranger introduced himself as Daniel Reed, Thomas's younger brother. He explained that he had spent years searching for Thomas's missing records. He believed Thomas had hidden them before disappearing. Daniel looked at the papers in Elena's hands. "You found the first clue." Elena stared at him. "Do you know where the rest are?" Daniel nodded. "The map will take us there." Clark looked toward the darkening valley. The mystery was finally beginning to make sense. But the most important part of Thomas Reed's secret was still waiting somewhere beyond the river. Daniel led Clark and Elena deeper into the valley, following the old trail shown on Thomas's map. After nearly an hour, they reached a large stone marker beside the river. Daniel pointed toward a small symbol carved into its surface. "Thomas told me this place was important." Elena took out her silver pendant. The symbol on the pendant matched the marking on the stone. She carefully placed the pendant against it. A small section of the stone moved. Behind it was a narrow wooden box. Elena opened it with trembling hands. Inside were several old documents and a final letter from her father. She unfolded the letter. Thomas explained that he had discovered an old agreement concerning the valley. The land was never meant to belong entirely to one person. It was supposed to remain available to the families who depended on it. He had hidden the original records because he feared they might disappear during the dispute. Elena read the letter silently. Tears filled her eyes. For years, she had wondered whether her father had simply left her. Now she finally understood. He had been trying to protect the truth. Clark stood beside her. "Your father wanted you to find this." Elena nodded. Daniel looked toward the distant hills. He wanted the valley to have a peaceful future. They returned to Red Creek with the documents. When the records were shown to the families, everyone listened carefully. The old agreement confirmed what Thomas had discovered. The valley was meant to be shared. The long disagreement could finally be settled without more division. Elena stood quietly beside Clark. The secret she had carried for so long was finally no longer hers alone. She looked at the silver pendant. "My father kept his promise." Clark smiled. "And now you can keep yours." For the first time since arriving in town, Elena looked completely at peace. In the weeks that followed, Red Creek slowly became a different place. The old disagreement over the valley was finally settled, and the families began working together to repair the river crossing and restore the nearby trails. Elena decided to stay. She carefully preserved her father's letters and maps, determined that his work would not be forgotten. One evening, Clark found her standing beside the river, holding the silver pendant. "I used to think this only reminded me of everything I had lost," she said. "And now?" Clark asked. She smiled. "Now it reminds me of everything I found." Clark smiled back. He remembered the morning when he had first seen her begging for bread in town. He had known nothing about her then. He had simply seen someone who needed help. That small decision had changed both their lives. Elena looked toward the sunset. "Thank you for stopping that day." Clark nodded. "I am glad I did." As the evening light faded across the valley, Elena finally felt she had found something she had been searching for all along. Not wealth. Not answers alone. A place where she belonged. And Clark knew that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can open the door to an entirely new beginning. If this story touched your heart, remember that sometimes one small act of kindness can change a person's entire future. Like this video if you believe compassion and courage can make a difference when someone needs help most. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more original Western frontier stories filled with mystery, courage, friendship, and unforgettable moments from the Old West. Comment below. If you were Clark, would you have stopped to help Elena when everyone else walked past her? Share this story with your friends and family and help spread the message that kindness can bring hope when someone needs it most. Thank you for watching. Until the next story, remember that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can lead to the biggest change.